Happy New Year. It's the first video in 2025. Hello family, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Vicki and you're with Grammy in the Kitchen. So today is about getting things in the freezer for quick, easy, healthy breakfasts and lunches. First thing we're going to make is going to be pizza dough, and this is my usual yeast pizza dough. Let's move over to that stand mixer and get this dough started. So we have 3 cups of warm water. I stuck it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. 4 teaspoons of yeast. We're going to need a 1/4 cup or 4 teaspoons of sugar. Now, if you're not sure if your yeast is activated, this is where you would bloom it, but I am not worried about my yeast because I keep it in the freezer in between use. So we're just going to move on. So I have a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And we're going to add 8 cups of all-purpose flour. Make a little well, and we're going to add 4 teaspoons of salt. Mix that up until the dough comes together. And it's that simple. Now this dough will make 6 12-inch pizzas or 4 18-inch pizzas. I like cooking this in the cast iron skillet so that my cast iron skillet is 12 inches. So I'm going to make it into 6. And I'm just eyeballing it just to get as close to even as possible. Good enough. Now I'm just going to roll it into a dough ball. And this is my pre-oiled Ziploc bags. This is what I use to proof my pizza dough, and I just keep these in the freezer in between use. And the reason I have so many is because one time I couldn't find my bag, so I ended up making more bags. So I'm just going to put this back into the freezer. And these will go into the refrigerator, and I can leave them in there for up to 24 hours. I have let them go 48 hours, but I don't suggest that. If I have time later this evening to make the pizzas, I will. If not, I'll do them in the morning. So these are going to go in the refrigerator to proof. So when I was putting all the ingredients together to make the pizzas, I realized my refrigerator freezer yeast is running really low. So I took the deep freezer yeast out. I need to fill this up. So I just keep this in a vacuum sealed bag in the deep freezer until I need it. And this was a 5-pound bag. It's probably still about 4 pounds, and it will last forever. That should hold me over for just a bit. It's probably about 2 cups. I need to get my vacuum sealer out and vacuum seal this back up. The next thing we're going to make is a bread. It's a little different. I'm only making a 1-pound yeast bread. So I have 2/3 cups of water that I just put in the microwave just for a few minutes. 1/8 of a cup or 2 tablespoons of sugar. 1/2 teaspoon of yeast. Hoping my stand mixer will mix this because it's a big bowl and a small volume. 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And we're going to need somewhere between 2 to 3 cups of flour. So I am going to start off with 2. And then we'll just add it as we need it. Make a little well and add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're just going to mix that together. Check the consistency, see if we need to add more flour or more water, and then we're going to knead it by hand a little bit. It's definitely not enough in here to knead. We're going to do it by hand. If you got one of those small stand mixer, you can use that. But mine's a big one. I do want to get a small one for the little jobs. Okay, by hand it is. And once we get everything incorporate, we're going to want to knead it for about 8 minutes. It's a little sticky. So I'm going to just add a little flour to my bench. I forgot an ingredient. Because we're going to be making a special bread, this recipe actually calls for pepper. So I'm going to put about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. Now I want to knead that in. It's no longer sticky. I don't think we need any more flour. No, we just need to knead this. All right, I think that looks good. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in the same bowl. Swish, 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 and turn. Cover it with plastic wrap. And I actually have a proof setting to my oven. Bread proof. And I'm just going to stick this in the oven and let it do its first rise. It's going to take about an hour or two. So this is my refrigerator freezer yeast. And my deep freezer yeast. Let me put this away, clean up a bit. We're going to move on to the next recipe. It's something I have been talking about for the last couple weeks. It's a homemade sourdough cinnamon toast crunch cereal. Now you can use active sourdough or you can use sourdough discard. I fed my sourdough this morning, kind of bulked it up because we're going to make the English muffin dough today, and then tomorrow we're going to cook them. This is my collection of sourdough discard. I just keep that in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use it. I am actually going to be doubling this recipe, so I need a cup of cold frozen butter, which is going to be 2 sticks, which is what this is. So I need to grate this. Should grate pretty easy since it's frozen. So we're going to need a cup of the butter. So once I get it all grated, I'll measure it out. Because we need a cup of butter for the dough itself, and we're going to need a 1/2 cup of butter that's melted for the topping. Now I am doubling this recipe, but I'll leave a link in the description below with the original recipe. But since I'm only going to do this once every 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to go ahead and double it. In the stand mixer bowl, I have 3 cups and 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of grated butter. And this was frozen butter, and I packed it in here. And I'm just going to mix this until the butter is well coated with the flour, sugar, and cinnamon. have 1 cup of sourdough discard. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And then we'll just add a tablespoon of water at a time, just so a dough ball will form. That looks good. And it smells like Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. So I took the bread dough out of the oven because we need the oven to preheat to 350 degrees so we can bake our Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. Now the recipe says to put this in a food processor. I do not have a food processor big enough for this dough. So I find it just as easy to put it in a stand mixer. I'm going to give it a little knead just to get everything put back together. Now in this bowl I have a 1/2 cup of sugar and a tablespoon of cinnamon. We're going to sprinkle that on the top. And then I went ahead and melted a 1/2 cup of butter. Now that is the original recipe. If I need to make more, that's fine. I can make some more. But the dough itself is a double recipe. I'm going to divide it into 4s just to make it easy and manageable. And I am going to roll it on parchment paper because it'll actually be easier to move it to the baking sheet on the parchment paper. So I got a little bit of flour. And then we're going to roll it out to about 1/4 inch thick. The thinner, the crispier the cereal will be. Then I have this handy little tool. They're about a 1/2 inch separation, like a pizza cutter. And now I'm going to cut my cereal. It's moving. And now we have little squares of cereal. Isn't that the cutest? Okay, I'm going to do another quarter of their dough. Do the same way, put it on there and cut it. So let me get this one rolled out to a 1/4 inch thick. So we're going to do half at a time. So here's the melted butter. We're going to just paint some butter on each one of these little pieces. Perfect. There's cinnamon sugar mixture. And we're just going to sprinkle some cinnamon sugar right on the top. If your family loves sweet cereal, might as well make it healthy for them. Perfect. And then we're going to bake this in a 350-degree oven for about 15-20 minutes. I'm going to set the timer for 10. Check it after that, and we'll just increase it by a minute or two. And in the meantime, I can go ahead and roll out the last 2 pieces. So when they come out of the oven, these will be ready to go into the oven. So this is the last of the Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. And it took all of the 20 minutes. I started off with 10 and just kept increasing. All right, so I'm gonna let those sit right here and cool off. The next bread we're gonna make is our sourdough bread. Fed my sourdough starter this morning, and it's all the way up here. I need 100 grams of active starter. I need to turn the oven off. Too much, too much. Okay, 101, that is good. 325 grams of room temperature water. We're going to mix that in together really well. Back on the kitchen scale, we need 20 grams of honey. And we need 475 grams of all-purpose flour. Tear it out to 0, 10 grams of salt. Now we're going to mix this together. Then we're going to cover it with plastic wrap. And then for every 30 minutes for the next 2 hours, that's a total of 4 stretch and pulls. And then we're going to let it rest until tomorrow morning. Then we'll bake it. I'm going to set this aside, set the timer for 30 minutes. And we have one more recipe we're going to make. That's a sourdough recipe. We're going to be baking sourdough English muffins. I am going to double this recipe so I can have more breakfast sandwiches in the freezer. This is the same recipe we used the last time we made English muffins, but I am doubling it. I microwaved the milk for about 30 seconds just to warm it up. Now we need a cup of active sourdough starter. Two cups of milk. We want to make sure we get that sourdough starter and that milk mixed in really well together. And we need 4 cups of flour. Get everything well incorporate. And it's going to look shaggy, but that is okay. Now on the English muffins, we don't need to do the stretch and pulls. We can just set this aside and let it ferment. And as for the cereal, I'm just going to break them up into the little squares that we scored them with. Perfect. And I don't have a jar big enough, so I'm just going to use a gallon-sized Ziploc bag. And when I want something healthy for a snack or a bowl of cereal, we have Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Let me get my kitchen reset, and then we're going to work on the yeast bread. The sourdough bread has 23 minutes left before we have to do our first stretch and pull. The sourdough English muffins, we're done with those for today. But I'm going to show you what we're going to do with this yeast bread. Give me 5 minutes to get this kitchen cleaned up, and I'll be right back. So this is our ham from Christmas. I want to remove as much of the meat from the bone as I can. I'm not going to throw the bone away. That's a good bone. We can make some beans with that. All right, let's start there. I'm going to want about a cup of this for our bread. We're going to make a ham cheese bread. Maybe just a little bit more. And by the way, the glaze we put on here was so good. All right, so that's for our bread. The rest of it I'm going to put in this bowl right now because I want to get this in the freezer for future meals. I don't want any of the fat. It's kind of hard to find out where that bone is. All right, that looks good. The rest of this I am going to save, plus that piece of fat for some beans. We'll put that in the freezer until I'm ready to make beans. And we can eat on the ham for another couple days, and then I'll stick that into vacuum seal bags and put that in the freezer. So I have about 8 ounces of Monterey Jack cheese. I want to cut these into 1/2-inch cubes. Perfect. So I have the 1 pound loaf pan. So I got some olive oil. Give everything a good little smear. Just using magnets to hold the paper back, and our beautiful yeast dough. That's why we put pepper in here, just to add another depth of flavor. So I'm going to smush it out. Let's add the ham. Add some cheese. Fold it in half. Add another layer of ham. Now we're making this up as we go, family. Might not need all that cheese, but that's okay. And then cheese. Now we're going to try to roll this up. Whatever falls out, we're just going to stuff back in there. I do want to seal the ends. Oh, we lost a piece. Tell me if that's not crazy. Drop it in our prepared pan. Cover it with plastic wrap, and now we're going to let it do a second rise. And it's time to do a stretch and pull on our sourdough bread. And this is the first stretch and pull. We have 3 more before we need to put it to bed. And we'll take care of this tomorrow. All right, that is done. Another 30 minutes and we'll do it again. So we're going to let the yeast, ham, and cheese roll do its second rise till it's doubled in size, and then we can bake this. Let it cool completely, and then we can slice into it. The sourdough bread, we just did our first stretch. We need to do 3 more. So in another 30 minutes, we'll do the second one. The double batch of sourdough English muffins is just going to sit right there until tomorrow morning. The pizza dough is in the refrigerator. We'll deal with that tomorrow. Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal is done. Well, other than baking this bread, we're done today. I'll see you in a couple hours, family. So our bread has risen beautiful. I do want to put a slit in it, just so when it expands, it won't break its own spot. You can see the ham and the cheese in there. How pretty is that? Oven is preheated for 375 degrees. I'm gonna put this bread, and this is the ham cheese bread, in the oven until it reaches a internal temperature of 205 to 215 degrees. And that's Fahrenheit. I want to set the timer for 30 minutes. I'll check on that and we'll probably have to extend it. It's going to take anywhere between probably 45 minutes to an hour, but I want to start low and work my way up to that. I'll bring you right back as soon as that's ready, and I'll tell you how long that took. Ooh, family, this bread smells so good. I do want to check the temperature. We need it to be between 205 degrees to 215 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it cooked for 30 minutes, and then I extended the time for another 10 minutes. Still wasn't up to temperature, so I extended it for another 10 minutes. So it's been in the oven for a total of 50 minutes. And I think we're done. So I am going to leave it right here all night, let it cool, and tomorrow we'll take it out and then we'll slice into it. But we still need to make our sourdough bread, our sourdough English muffins to make breakfast sandwiches, and our pizza dough is still in the refrigerator doing its initial rise, and we still need to cook that. So I'll see you in the morning, family.